Hey everybody, Gizmo here. Welcome to the channel. I got my libation. Hopefully you've got something too. My buddy Pikachu, Lance Mate Pikachu, because tonight we're talking about BattleTech. Hope that you are in for a treat here. I think you're in for a treat. I hope you're ready for a treat. Because what we're going to be talking about tonight is sort of the current history of BattleTech. We talked in the last video, and I'll post a link to it over this way somewhere. No, maybe just above. That's going to have a link to the previous video about the history of BattleTech from the game perspective. So when you're watching the game, you see there's this little movie at the beginning of it, this sort of introductory movie, has a whole bunch of dates, no information, don't really know what's going on. I explain all of that. And then I go on to explain what happens after that video and sort of where we end up today. So today, though, I want to talk about the campaign, where we start, all that stuff. But I want to put it in the broader context of the inner sphere of 3025/26. What does the inner sphere look like? Who are the major players? Who are the leaders? How do you recognize the different houses? That kind of stuff. So with that in mind, let me clink here and cheers. Ah, yes. Okay, and let's go ahead and jump in and talk about BattleTech. So the biggest thing we have here is that there are 5 major houses in the BattleTech universe. They are House Liao, House Steiner, House Davion, House Marek, and House Karita. They are the basis for what was the Star League, and they are now the successor states that have been fighting for about 200 and something years, 250 I think, since the fall of the Star League for supremacy over the inner sphere. The problem is each of them is about equal in terms of their abilities. So no one house can conquer any other house. And certainly if that looked like that was going to happen, the other houses would probably, join up and fight that one back. So what we sort of have is this stalemate that exists. And there's a little bit of work that happens back and forth where things going on, where people are, there's some planets that shift hands, over the course of, a couple of years. That's pretty common. But in general, the major boundaries between the houses persist, and they stay the way they are. And what we have here is the inner sphere. And each of these areas on the inner sphere tells you who sort of owns that space. So they're color coded, and we're going to go through each one of them. But in general, it's a pretty large section of the galaxy, at least of the arm of the galaxy that we live in, that has all this stuff. At the very center of that map, where all of those meet, is Terra. It is the home point, sort of the origin of the inner sphere. So everything is based upon where Terra is. Comstar, which I talked about last time, and is responsible for communications and sort of acts as an arbiter between the inner sphere states, owns Terra. It's sort of like a neutral territory. Comstar has it. It's where the Star League headquarters, where the capital was. And since no one successor state really owns Terra, now they're all sort of vying for control of the different spaces. So let's go ahead and take a look at the individual houses, and then I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll talk at the end about the campaign that you play in the BattleTech game, and then kind of how that figures in. So the first one we're going to be talking about is House Steiner. And I had to move up in here to the upper left here because I'm showing you everything on the right. So House Steiner here is in blue. It's also called the Lyran Commonwealth. It is primarily known as a sort of an economic powerhouse. It has a lot of industry. It has really good business people. It also has an awful lot of corruption, and it has not very effective military leaders. That said, it does have some people that are fair, and it has hired a lot of mercenaries to help sort of bolster its ranks. So following the fall of Star League, several of the Star League Defense Force units that remained after Alexander Kerensky took the majority and fled the inner sphere, they didn't have anywhere to go because there's no Star League and they're just the military. What do we do? So most of them formed mercenary units that then hired themselves out to the individual successor states. So within each successor state, you have house units that are units that the house or the successor state is responsible for, funding and everything else. But they also have mercenary units that they hire to help bolster their offensive or defensive capabilities. Steiner has picked up some very good ones, including the one that my character works for, the 12 Star Guards. They are actually a leftover from the Star League Defense Forces. So they and Air Downey Light Horse and 21st Centauri Lancers. There's several that all sort of formed out of SLDF units that have been existing and succeeding and thriving in the successor state conflicts, also called the Succession Wars. The symbol for House Steiner is the Steiner fist, and you'll see this in a lot of places, but it's pretty common. It simply demonstrates the tagline is indomitable will. But that's a little weak. There's a big heavy glove there that they're going to smash you with, is what they're trying to project. Unfortunately, that's not really what they're doing. In most cases, like I said, a lot of people kind of think that that House Steiner is weak from a lot of different perspectives, especially around military. But they are very economically powerful, and they do have a lot of sway. Its capital is Tharkad, which is that little red circle there. It's right there where those four lines intersect. And that is the head of that's the capital of the whole thing. There are individual capitals for each of those different sort of states that are underneath that. But each of those all report into the Archon, which is the head of the Lyran Commonwealth. And her name is Katrina Steiner, and that's her. So she is the head of the Lyran Commonwealth. She is part of House Steiner. Most of the houses by this point have sort of devolved into monarchies. There are some exceptions, but in general, if you are the leader, you can expect that your children will be the leaders after you. She has a daughter, Melissa Steiner, and as part of the world that they talk about, the Milu, there is this secret treaty that exists between them and the Federated Sons, or House Davion, and it is that eventually Melissa Steiner will be married to Hans Davion, who is the head of the Federated Sons, and then they'll at that point form an alliance. The other three states learned about this and formed their own alliance against the two of them. So then now it's still sort of evenly balanced between 3 states and 2 states. But anyway, the idea here is that there is the leader of the Lyran Commonwealth, or House Steiner, is Katrina Steiner. Like I said, they've been doing pretty well economically, not so well militarily. Okay. The next house we're going to talk about is House Karita. And I haven't moved on over here because I'm going to put this over the other side. So I'm sorry about bouncing around a little bit, but it doesn't really work if I'm kind of going around in a circle. So House Karita is actually shown by the Karita dragon. And that is the symbol of the house, and they paint that on all their battle mechs and everything else. Lyran Commonwealth is sort of based upon European, especially Germanic settlers. The people who went there after during the Great Exodus were primarily Northern Europeans, and so that's kind of how that ended up going to that direction. And so very Germanic, very Prussian in a way. The Draconis Combine, or House Karita, really moved in the direction of the Japanese style. So they are bound by the Bushido because of the successor states and the succession wars. There's been a resurgence of that sort of samurai code and Ronin code. There's a lot of honor, a lot of face, very important in the Karitan culture. Their capital, Luthien, is located right there. In the middle of that. So you can kind of expect that all the house capitals are going to be sort of, outside of the main ring of the conflict zones, so they're not as close. They're sort of buried within each individual house. So that is where Luthien is located, and it's where the coordinator of the Draconis Combine, Takashi Kurita, lives. Takashi has a son. His name is Theodore. And Theodore is quite brash, but he's also really, really good. Takashi is very, I would say, rigid and formal, but he's also very honor bound, and his desire is to do the best thing for his people, but at the same time he takes a very militant stance toward things, and dissension is punished severely. The Draconis Combine has an awful lot of very strict fascist state kind of controls in it. The ISP particularly is their internal security police, and they're draconian. Not surprisingly for the Draconis Combine, the ISP is draconian towards the people. They're secret police, not secret police, but a state police force, and they're a little harsh in their judgments. That said, the Draconis Combine is incredibly strong militarily. Again, because of the code of Bushido and the honor that individual mech warriors have, there's an awful lot of I guess no way I'm trying to way to put it. There's an awful lot of things about how they conduct warfare that is very honorable. They do things that are sort of surreptitious, sort of the ninja style. We'll attack surreptitiously, blame it on somebody else, that kind of thing. But in general, when you engage the Cretan forces in combat, you can expect that there's going to be a very honor-bound kind of relationship there. So most of the books actually really get into that, especially the Mike Stackpole books of the Fourth Succession War, the beginning of the Fourth Succession War, talks a lot about these things. All right, so that's House Kurita. Let's go ahead and talk about the next house, House Davion, or the Federated Sons. The Federated Sons, a lot of the people who came to the Federated Sons during the Great Exodus were from Western Europe and from the British Isles. So Irish, Scottish, English, Welsh, that kind of stuff. So a lot of their culture is based upon the British Isles culture. The symbol for the Federated Sons is the Starburst with the sword. You can almost imagine Excalibur. Again, I think a lot of the things about the Fed Sons is that they're sort of like Arthurian legend. Hans Davion, who's the leader of the Federated Sons, is almost like an Arthur kind of character. But he is. But the whole Fed Sons, again, they're all monarchies in general. So. The capital of the Federated Sons is New Avalon, which is located there in that red circle. And the leader is a gentleman named Hans Davion. Not surprisingly, it's House Davion. His nickname is the Fox, and he is a cunning and tactically brilliant commander of battle mech forces. He has done during the early Succession War, the Third Succession War. He was instrumental in helping save numerous planets along the border with House Kurita. So he's definitely sort of been there, done that, got the T-shirt from a military perspective. But he's also he sees an awful lot of good in the world from let's try to make the world a better place than when we left it. So he's created the New Avalon Institute of Science. He's brought along Team Bonsai to help lead that stuff. They're doing an awful lot of stuff trying to rediscover lost Star League technology. So the benefit of House Davion to the overall picture is that they are trying to sort of reestablish their scientific understanding of things, which actually puts them in conflict with Comstar quite a lot. So that's a challenge because Comstar actually has an awful lot of Star League information, and so they understand these things. They also don't want the Inner Sphere to get access to it, because when they did have access to it, they did pretty horrible things. the successor states used to have large starships and huge fleets of interstellar craft, and during the first succession war, pretty much they blew each other out of the sky. And they, rained down orbital bombardments and all these things. In essence, they just completely devastated the inner sphere following the fall of the Star League. And as a result of that, Comstar doesn't want to see that same thing happen again. So they are trying to do what they can to sort of safeguard that knowledge. At the same time, it puts them in a position of power over the other successor states, or over the successor states, because they aren't really one. But they do have an awful lot of influence. They have an awful lot of power. And they work behind the scenes in a lot of ways that are really not understood by most of the successor states. I would say Davion probably does understand kind of where they're coming from. He's a smart guy. So anyway, that's the Federated Sons. The next we're going to be talking about is House Liao, or the Capellan Confederation. They are obviously a very small successor state. You look at them and you go, why haven't, House Marek to the left and House Davion to the right just completely smush them? And it's because it's very densely populated. If you'll see, you can see a whole lot of different star systems that exist within the Capellan Confederation. And all those star systems are incredibly rich in materials and resources that Liao can use to build battle mechs and other ways of defending themselves. So while it's a small state, it is equally powerful to the other ones. That said, its leader is a little wonky, and we'll talk about him in a moment. Their symbol is the Liao sword. Again, as we talked about the Great Exodus, a lot of people who came to House Liao were from China, Southeast Asia, that kind of thing. And so they brought a lot of that culture with them. And they have their capital is Xi'an, which is located right there, sort of in the middle. It is, you can tell, much closer to the other successor states than the other capitals are. But again, it's because House Liao is very narrow. That said, its leader, Maximilian Liao, has been really good about maximizing the forces of his small empire to his benefit. He takes in sort of the same vein as Takashi Kurita, sort of militant. At the same time, he's not entirely sane. I think that he has periods where he's completely, absolutely clear. There's utter clarity and vision, and other times where it's just you have to wonder what the guy was thinking. In general, though, they have been able to stave off attacks from Marek and from Davion for over 200 years now, so they're doing something right. His children are the ones that are going to be playing a huge role in the upcoming years. But they are also very politically astute. They are the machinations within the Capellan Confederation are legendary. They're very intricate and shifting alliances all the time, that kind of thing. It's, what can I get for benefit today that's going to potentially benefit you, but maybe it doesn't, and that's okay because it benefits me. So there's a lot of very cutthroat in the Capellan Confederation. All right. And the last house is House Marek, also called the Free Worlds League. And again, most people who went here were sort of like from the Americas or from other places where there was more of a democratic sense. They have as their symbol the Marek Eagle, which again is emblazoned on all their battle mechs. The Free Worlds League is more like a republic than any of the other houses. The other houses are very clearly monarchies with a clear head of state and clear, hierarchy. There are nobility ranks in most of them, and then there are the peasants below that. House Marek is more egalitarian. It has a lot less of that kind of thing. It has its capital. Atreus is located in that little blue circle right there. So about the same distance from Terra as the other houses, except for, well, even Sion is probably about the same distance. But it is deep in the heart of Marek space. They are ruled by Captain General Janos Marek. He is a pretty good leader. But again, because of the less formal structures and less hierarchical structures that exist within the Free Worlds League, there is a lot of political machinations that go on. I say not quite as bad as the Capellan Confederation, but they are pretty intricate, and there's a lot of different shifting forces that are working against each other, especially around what's happening with succession within Free Worlds League. One of Marek's sons is in Comstar, and there's a lot of things that are going on. As you know, if Comstar, if Janos dies, then does Comstar take over the Free Worlds League? And so there's a lot of intrigue that goes along with that. So the political pundits have an awful lot of fun with the Free Worlds League. All right, so now we sort of talked about the outlay of how the inner sphere looks with it at 3025. Let's talk about the campaign and see what that actually looks like for us. So here's the inner sphere, and we're talking about a vast space here. Lots of it takes several months to go from one side to the other. They do create what they're called command circuits, which is that you will have jump ships stationed at different stars along a path, ready, already charged, ready to go. And what happens is that one jump ship will go from one system to the next system. The drop ship will move from that jump ship to the next jump ship, and then that one jumps. There's no waiting, there's no anything else. And so you can get places pretty quickly sometimes, but most of the time it takes a very, very long time to get anywhere in the inner sphere. It's not it's definitely, it's sort of like driving from Canada to Mexico. It's not going to happen overnight, and so it just takes time, and it's a time-consuming process. My character campaign right now, I'm on almost my third year of being a mercenary. So I mean, we've got an awful lot of stuff that we've done, and we're kind of still going on. All right. So where are we? Well, kind of here, actually. This is where the campaign takes place. It takes place in this space right here, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second here. It takes place right about there. That's where the whole campaign takes place. So when you look at that and you go, okay, and that's the inner sphere, and that's where we are, is just this little space down here. Yeah, that's where we are. That's this little space right here is where this entire campaign is taking place. Like I said, what I'm hoping is that after we do the campaign, that we can then go anywhere in the inner sphere. We do have reputations with all the other houses, and we do, and so it seems to me very odd that if you were to say, okay, well, we're here, and I'm going to have a reputation with the Draconis Combine. Why? They're like 300 light years away from me. How could that possibly matter? So my hope is that once the campaign is over, that you get full control of the mercenary unit, and you can go anywhere. At which point you can go to work for any of these people that you want to. If you want to go work for Marek, great. You want to go work for the Combine, great. Those options are available to you. But like I said, this is kind of where everything is taking place. There is, you'll see over there, just inside the Taurian Concordant, which is that space just to the right of that blue circle. There's that Regis Roost. That's one of the missions that you do, is you go to that star system. So there's a lot more planets described in the BattleTech game than are on this map. I think part of that is just because when Harebrained Schemes is looking at doing this stuff, they said, well, what can we do? How can we get this to work? And how can we, link it in with things that are already here? They sort of filled this space out. It didn't exist before. And so they were able to simply kind of go in and say, hey, look, let's add stuff to this. So I think that's the benefit that we have here, is that we're really sort of expanding the universe that BattleTech has with this campaign, at the same time linking it with the existing world that was already created, 35 years ago. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I hope that this helps you understand a little bit more about sort of like the world of BattleTech as it exists. Again, this was the first version of BattleTech. It has since gone on and expanded out, and there's clans, and there's the all these wars, and Comstar, Resurgent, and all the stuff that happens later. That is sort of completely independent of just this space, and this is my favorite time. This is where this is where I first got introduced to BattleTech. This is the timeline that I got introduced to. These were the successor states and leaders and personages that I understood and I knew. And this is where, I got my feet wet. So from my perspective, this is kind of what BattleTech is. And I'm so excited that Harebrained Schemes has come back and said, we're going to build the BattleTech game that you want. A turn-based computer game with phenomenal graphics, with awesome gameplay, with some tweaks to make it, to sort of fix some of the things that weren't quite right in the board game, a little wonky. And we're going to set it in 3025. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, this is perfect. Other games have been set with the clans and everything else. I mean, in fact, there's Ghost Bear Legacy, and MechWarrior 2 is all about clans and all. But this is where I was really excited. And this is what I've been hoping for. So thank you so much for joining me on this little journey. I hope that this helps you understand. If you have any questions, please comment below and let me know, especially on YouTube. If you are looking at this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and the little bell icon and get notified when I post up new stuff. I am doing a lot of BattleTech. I'm also doing some Conan Exiles, which I've been playing now for the Xbox. It's been kind of fun to just kind of screw around with that. I'm also going to be working a lot on some other things. State of Decay 2 is coming out. I've got pre-release for that, so I'm going to be playing that starting this weekend, or maybe next week. And then we've got a whole bunch of stuff. So stay tuned. I hope that we can get some more BattleTech stuff in. But click subscribe if you're watching this on Mixer, or Twitch. Please click follow. I'm really trying to do what I can to build the base of players that want to talk about BattleTech, or they want to talk about Conan, or they want to talk about Call of Duty, or Kingdom Come Deliverance, or any of that stuff. I'd like to try to find ways that we can all interact and learn from each other, these sort of best practices, and collaborate on these things. Please, all my stuff's at the bottom there. Follow me at Gizmo Devo at all of that stuff. Like I said, the only difference is on YouTube, I'm Gizmo Gaming. But if you subscribe, you'll get notifications regardless of what I'm called on there. So thank you again so much. I appreciate it. And I really hope that you've had a good time. Until Pikachu and I see you on the other side. Cheers. Good stuff. And thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.